To call this meeting to order. Ms. Tanner, would you please do the roll call?
Yes. Basine?
Here.
Buffalo?
Here.
Martin? Olson?
Here.
Thomas?
Here.
Calogero?
Here. All right. We'll move to school board, agenda items 2, school board workshop, item 2.01, FOIA COIA training.
Good afternoon, everyone. For those I haven't yet had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Margaret Kelly, and I am an assistant city attorney here for the city of Norfolk, which means I am also an assistant city attorney helping out the school board. I get to do all of the FOIA and Freedom of Information Act and Conflict of Interest Act matters. So I'm here for you if you need me in the future. Mr. Pishko and his entire office are, of course, always here. But for today, we're going to start off with some training. FOIA requires that certain public bodies, including the school board, have to receive training within 2 months after assuming their local elected office, and thereafter at least once during each consecutive period of 2 calendar years, commencing on the date you last completed your training session. Your school board clerk keeps a record of when your training was. We do try to do these for you once a year, so you may get more FOIA than you need, but that's better than having no FOIA. This training can usually also be done online sometimes. The current online version that the FOIA Council, which exists all the way up in Richmond, has is down for that for some reason. So that's why I'm here today to give it to you. But there is always sometimes that option in case you can't miss one of these training sessions. I am from the north, so I speak very fast. Please stop me if I'm going too fast. If you have any questions, just let me know. I'm happy to answer them as we go, or you can do them to the end. Or you can call afterwards, whichever you feel most comfortable with. We are here to help you all with your learning of FOIA. The basic principle of FOIA is always, I think, the most important part to start with because it guides, as long as you stick to this principle, usually you're going to be fine. And that principle is that the affairs of government are not intended to be conducted in an atmosphere of secrecy, since at all times the public is to be the beneficiary of any action taken at any level of government. And this applies to a public body like the school board really in 2 ways. FOIA has 2 main sections to it. One is public records. What is a public record within the public body's possession or its members' possession? And another is a meeting of a public body like we are doing today. So we're going to go through them one by one. It's important to keep this idea of transparency in mind because the FOIA statute explicitly says that it is to be interpreted liberally. That means if the starting assumption is everything is open to the public. There are exceptions, especially when dealing with the schools. You also have FERPA. You have a bunch of other laws that do protect anytime you're dealing with scholastic information, especially when you're dealing with children and juveniles. But the starting point is supposed to be that the records and the meetings are open, and then we move from there to find exceptions. If there is a debate about whether or not an exception to this openness applies, this the default under idea of FOIA is transparency you're in mind supposed because to the FOIA
err on the
statute
side
explicitly
of letting
says
the
that it
public
is to be
know what
interpreted
happens.
liberally. So again, that's why this is a great way to starting point to keep in mind for everything we're about to talk about with FOIA. All right, so who has the right to use FOIA? Again, this isn't FERPA. FERPA is a different issue. It is controlled under federal law. This is specifically the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. And for the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, the people who have the right to invoke FOIA are the people of the Commonwealth, which is described as the citizens of the Commonwealth and then representatives of newspapers and magazines that circulate within the Commonwealth. So the watchdogs, if you will, the people who are there to keep the citizens in the know about what's actually happening. There is no definition of citizen in FOIA, so there's some common law definitions out there that we can use, but generally speaking, the way your FOIA officers work is as long as the person can provide an address in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we're going to treat them, we're not going to question. We're not going to do a background check, try and find out if they are a citizen or not. Again, the goal of FOIA is transparency, so we'd rather, be open about a record than try to fight somebody whether or not they're in the military and they live here or they don't live here, something along those lines. The question about what a public body is one that I always want to touch on a little bit because obviously the school board is a public body, but you also have various committees and commissions, and even those count as public bodies. The FOIA specifically says that it shall not, the definition of a public body, which is what FOIA applies to, shall not exclude any committee, subcommittee, or entity because it has private sector or citizen members. So if you are forming a committee that is made up of citizens, it can still be a public body. It doesn't matter that they're not elected. All right, so we'll get into what the public meetings are. Generally speaking, I like to refer to this as the good old-fashioned kindergarten buddy school system. A meeting is anything that is a group. It's a gathering of as many as 3 members or more of a public body. If your public body has a quorum that is less than 3, so say it's a committee only made up of 3 people and the quorum is 2, that quorum, that 2, does become a public body. But for the purposes of school board, it would be 3 or more members. So if you're traveling in groups of, in pairs of 2, you're fine, you're not in a meeting. But once you have that third person come in and you get in, start touching on what the subject matter of a meeting would be, which I'll get to in a second, that's when you come into FOIA territory. A meeting can be physical or electronic, so phone calls can constitute meetings if you have 3 or more people on the line. Chat rooms, if you are in an instant chat type of situation, that will turn into a meeting. We get the question a lot whether or not emails constitute a meeting, because if you have 3 or more on there. The Supreme Court has issued, Virginia has issued some sort of guidance on this that's a few years old, and I'm sure it's going to change with the times. That guidance is, as long as the email is functioning essentially like a letter would, it's not a meeting yet. So you've all seen those emails where one person sends an email and then within the next 20 seconds, everybody's responding right away. That can become a meeting. That is more of an instantaneous, you're not physically gathered, but you are getting into dangerous territory. If you've sent one email out to the entire group and then that person responds to you individually, you're not in a meeting. If somebody has waited a few hours or so to respond and they respond to the group, again, that wouldn't probably be considered a meeting because you do have that more correspondence angle to it. But I always advise it's just safest if you get an email to all of you, don't CC everybody. Maybe you can CC your chair. That's always a safe option, I think, if you want to keep somebody else on the school board in the know about what's happening. You can CC your attorneys over there, Mr. Cloud or Mr. Fox. They don't count as being in the meeting. But it's always safe. It's not to hit reply all and keep everybody on that chain. It doesn't include gatherings of your employees either. So while government isn't supposed to operate in secrecy, there is also a fair recognition by the General Assembly that if citizens were allowed to come sit in and watch every single thing your employees are doing 24/7, there's very little that could get done. It would sort of bring government to a screeching halt. So again, it's not supposed to be secret. What your employees are doing is why you have the public records section that we'll get to in a little bit. So they're not doing things in secrecy either. They're still open to public inspection. But these meetings are where the discussion and transaction of public business is really taking place, is where we want to make sure that the public can know what's happening. And like we talked about, a meeting can be virtual or it can be in person like you are today. All virtual public meetings are an option for some committees and subcommittees. They're not an option for the school board. The school board isn't allowed to have everybody appear electronically. You are allowed to have, and I believe you do have, a policy that allows individual members to appear electronically for a certain number of meetings each year for various different reasons, for health reasons, if they have a work commitment that they can't get out of, but they have free time and they can in that work commitment. So those are all options. They still count as true meetings. All right, so once you have 3 people together, what do you talk about that brings you into this territory of a meeting? I will say, first of all, it's generally safe to avoid being in groups of 3 because some citizens do get concerned, and there have been, not by the school board that I'm aware of, but there have other school boards and other public bodies have done meeting violations. So some citizens are, rightfully concerned always that there are meetings happening that aren't being properly noticed. So if you're in groups of 3, it's not a clear, sort of non-work function. Like, you can go to somebody's birthday party, you can be a member of society, you can go to a Tides game and say hello to each other. That's allowed. You don't have to avoid each other entirely. But if you're at something like you are at maybe a civic league and a parent starts talking to you and there's 2 more school board members nearby, even if they're not engaging in it, just for the sake of propriety, for the sake of keeping everybody aware that there's no secrecy happening, it's always best to have somebody exit. Because a meeting is this lengthy list. It goes on for a second slide. So I'm not going to read it all aloud. But it is something where there's discussion or transaction of public business taking place among the members. There are exceptions, like I said, for public forums, informational gatherings, just these sort of social gatherings that you're at. Again, we want you all to be able to engage with your community, engage with each other outside of school boards, so that is allowed. Just make sure you're not discussing or transacting public business. And the General Assembly has helpfully, finally, for the first time this year, defined what that means. There was some concern for the past few years about what's public business, what isn't, and is something like the school board, where anything dealing with a child, anything dealing with teachers, there is a concern that becomes public business. So the General Assembly has defined it. Public business for a meeting means any activity a public body has undertaken or proposes to undertake on behalf of the people it represents. So, like I said, if you're at the Tides game and somebody's talking about, how Amtrak's going to work with the casino, obviously that is public business for City Council. It's not public business for you all. So you can engage in those conversations. That's not a problem. But once somebody starts talking about any type of subject that you have already undertaken or proposed to undertake, then it is something that will trigger this meeting clause, and you should not be in groups of 3 or more when you're talking about it. Pretty much everyone's allowed to attend a public meeting. Entry must be free. That doesn't mean you can't require identification. It just means that the form of the identification has to be free as well. So, for example, there can't be a rule that identification has to be a driver's license, because driver's licenses cost money. You can do some sort of photo ID. You can do like a picture in the moment that then just gets deleted. Identification is allowed for safety reasons. Like I said, the point is that entry has to be accessible to everyone, and so there can't be a monetary barrier. We do, of course, have closed meetings exceptions, which I'm going to get into in a second. There are some times when you're going to need to be able to discuss things without the public there, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I will say one other thing. When we talk about who all is allowed at meetings, there is also a rule under FOIA that anyone is allowed to record these public meetings. They can't be right up in your face when you're on the dais with the camera blocking you from everyone or getting in your way. The school board is allowed to set up policies about where these kinds of filming equipment will take place, but the meetings can be filmed. People cannot be prohibited from filming or recording the meetings. It is all a part of this idea of transparency. And in fact, it is encouraged, but it's not required by FOIA, but it is actually encouraged to record them yourselves, to get them out there. So, your citizens who can't make it down there, whether it's for a permanent reason or it's just in that day, they're very busy, they can't make it, that way they can watch what's happening too. And this isn't to say you can't ever have meetings, you can't ever have these discussions of 3 or more other than your school board meetings. The important point of FOIA is the public needs to be able to see them, so the public has to have notice that they're going to happen. And that is when FOIA comes into play with meeting notices. And it says that for these meetings, 3 or more, there has to be a notice posted 3 working days prior to the meeting. That's working days. It's not just calendar days, so it doesn't include Saturdays and Sundays and holidays. And I'm sure your clerk would appreciate more than a 3 working days heads up for that, but the minimum is 3. I wish I could change it on the slide, Karen. I'm sorry, I can't. So to post notice, it has to be at 3 different locations. It has to be posted on the official government website. It has to be at a prominent public location and at the office of the clerk or the chief administrator. And once that's posted, you can have the meetings. That is, there's no barrier to having them at that point in time. There are exceptions for when you need an emergency meeting. There are exceptions for when a meeting runs over and you need to continue it, and if everybody agrees to continue it tomorrow, there are those certain situations. And our offices here, Mr. Cloud and Mr. Fox, are always willing to, they know that law backwards and forwards too, so I'm a little nervous they're watching me as I present this to you, but I'm also here for help on that as well. We know how to do those. We're happy to help you get them in play if they need to happen. And where can a meeting be? It can be pretty much anywhere. We get back to it can't be a place where you are prohibiting people from entering. It can't be a place where you're prohibiting recording devices from being in there. But there isn't a rule about the size of it. So, for example, after your normal sessions are in your bigger room where more people can come watch. Your work sessions might be in the smaller room. As long as you're not choosing a room that's deliberately chosen to be small so people can't come in and see it, that's fine. The FOIA recognizes things like the fire marshal safety rules are there for a reason. We can't pack more people in that will be safe. But again, that is where this idea of the public body itself being encouraged to record its own meetings and transmit those electronically as well helps. So if, people can still have a chance to see what's happening. All right, so now we're getting to the closed meetings. There's about 50 specific limitations, which is very high, for why a public body can have a closed meeting. There are various ones that you will probably run into more often. Things like discussion about identifiable personnel is a major one. Since the employees are your employees, you are in a different situation than many public bodies where they are technically the employee of the chief executive officer. In this case, they're yours. So you may very often need to be going into closed sessions to talk about personnel matters for identifiable personnel. There are still rules about it to make sure that the public can still have a transparency of what's happening. So the statutes say that even when there's a closed meeting, that no resolution, ordinance, rule, contract, regulation, or motion that comes out of the closed meeting is effective unless it's been voted on in an open meeting where the substance is reasonably identified. So the people still have an understanding of what went home behind closed doors, the rumor it happens from Hamilton type of a thing. They need to know what's going on there. And the statute is very explicit about the procedure for how to close a meeting and what votes need to be taken afterwards. That includes things like, we had mentioned, there has to be an affirmative recorded vote in an open meeting almost right at the same time that you're doing this closed session, and that has to identify the subject matter, state the purpose of the meeting as authorized by that state code, and the applicable exception from the open meeting requirements. You don't have to memorize all of this. Again, that's what our office is here for, to help you draft them. Your clerk can help you draft these motions and make sure we're following all the right rules and procedures. But they do happen. Sometimes you do have to go into a closed session where the public can't be, and in those cases, we do want to always make sure we're following procedures so the public is still kept in a level of knowledge about what's happening. Right. Any questions about meetings so far? Let's see, how am I doing on time? Doing good. Okay. All right. So for public records, you have Freedom of Information Officer, and I thought I saw Mr. Walker walk in. There he is. The Freedom of Information Officer is charged by state code to know FOIA. So they are there. They're there to assist, and they are to be the public's point of contact for these public records. They must be designated and publicly identified, which Mr. Walker has been. And their job is to be that go-between between the public body and the public and help them, help both sides understand and make sure that they're complying with FOIA. Now, I will say when we talk about the custodian of a record, technically FOIA says, very interesting language, that the records, that a records request would be to the custodian of the record. And FOIA does not like to give me helpful definitions, so it doesn't define what the custodian of the record is. So oftentimes, poor Mr. Walker, I think, winds up operating sort of as that custodian of record. He's the one who goes to the different departments. A citizen would go online to the Just FOIA portal, submit the request for what they want, and then he and his team try to get that request to the correct custodians, to the departments, to the various employees and officers who might have those records. But it is important that a records request does not have to be made to the FOIA officer. Nothing in the state code says that that is where the request has to go. So if a parent stops you and says, I want this record, again, I would argue in court that you're not the custodian unless it's a record you're physically holding at that time. But for safety's sake, if somebody asks you for a record, let Mr. Walker know immediately, and he will take it from there. He knows everything I'm about to tell you next about deadlines and times and proper responses, and he is there to make sure that this happens as seamlessly as possible. FOIA requests do not have to be in writing. They can be verbal, they can be oral. So somebody can come to a school board meeting and say from the microphone, I want this contract. That is a FOIA request. It does have to be processed that way. So if you're getting those, make sure you're getting down as much information about the requester as you can, particularly how to contact them and what they're looking for, and let your FOIA officer know as soon as possible. So what is a public record? It's pretty much anything. Everything except the furniture. So it's all writings and recordings that consist of letters, words, or numbers, or their equivalent in any of its forms. It is data. It is the background running data on a program like PeopleSoft. That is all technically a public record. It is, the key part is that it is prepared or owned by or in the possession of a public body or its officers, employees, or agents in the transaction of public business. So technically your emails, wishing somebody a happy birthday, even if it's on your work email, it's technically maybe not a public record if you're just telling your best friend a happy birthday from there, but it is in the possession of the public body, so odds are it may, even if it's just accidentally, get turned over to a FOIA request. So be very careful about what of your personal business you're doing on your school board emails, because those will get swept up in some FOIAs. And like I said, when your FOIA officers and your IT are trying to sort through sometimes thousands of emails, those innocuous little ones may slip through, and they may not be making that distinction, is this technically in the transaction of public business or not? They're going to err on the side of it was on a school board email, it's going. You don't have to create a record to respond to a FOIA request. And I always put this in there because very often I think public officials try to be helpful when it comes to FOIA, which is great, and we love that. But if somebody sends a FOIA request in asking for the record explaining why something happens and there's no record, but you respond back in an email saying, well, it didn't happen because 3 paragraphs later, why? Now I've got a record, and so now it gets turned over. So there's nothing wrong with just writing back, I don't have a record. There's nothing wrong with picking up the phone and calling your FOIA officer to find out what actually is going on, what needs to be requested, what's not. There's no requirement to create one. Sometimes we will, the school board will deliberately create one. There is a section of FOIA that says that the public body can abstract or summarize information if agreed. So like I said, everything, all the information that is kept on all of your programs that like HR keeps, anything like that, finance may keep, technically every piece of data of that is a public record. So very often, a requester will be just looking for a specific set of information. They don't want an entire budget necessarily printed out or an entire account printed out. They're looking for something specific. So it will be agreed to abstract or summarize, and a record may be created at that point. All right, and this is the part why you've got FOIA officers keep us all in check. The public body must respond to a FOIA request within 5 working days of receiving the request. And there are these 4 responses that have to happen. There's a 5th one that I'll get to in a second. And they are that the records are being provided in full, and the records are actually, in fact, provided in full, that they're being entirely withheld, at which case they do have to cite the approximate amount that is being withheld, so approximately 100 pages, 100 emails, and the subject matter of what's been withheld, that they're being provided in part and withheld or redacted in part, or they cannot be found or do not exist. To withhold or redact, even entirely or in part, there has to be a specific law that allows that withholding. And the response has to include that citation for the person. So the person can know not only the general subject matter of what's been withheld, but where that authority is coming from. The fifth option, which isn't on here, the fifth option is actually that it is practically impossible for the public body to respond within 5 working days, and we need an extra 7 working days. And it's because the General Assembly understands your employees have other things to do. They have to do their jobs. FOIA is a part of their job, but on top of it, they have their actual spelled out job description. Your teachers have jobs. They have duties and responsibilities. So, and especially when you're dealing with public bodies that are of the size of all of your employees, everybody in the Norfolk Public Schools family, it does turn into very often, we can't get it done in the 5 days. Plus, all the redactions have to happen within that time period, and that can take up a lot of time as well. Again, when we get these requests that say, I think Dr. Birdsong had one, somebody wanted every email that had the word investigation for the last year.
Right.
And that was a lot. It includes spam, it includes news emails, it was a lot. Sometimes, Outlook wanted to be more helpful, and then we're like, well, this word is like investigation, so
Right.
we're going to put that in there.
Exactly.
So we have to sort through all of those, and it can take a very long time. All right, so why can some records be held? There does have to be a specific exemption to it that is listed. It can't just be because it's embarrassing, that we don't like it, that we don't want anyone to know about it at this point. There has to be a specific legal reason why it's being withheld, and those are spelled out. And like I said, when we do apply the exemption, even then, transparency is still at the forefront. The person has to be told approximately the volume of what's being withheld, the subject matter, and where they can go and find what that exemption is. And where are they? They're all throughout FOIA. They're all throughout the Code of Virginia. There are some sections of the Code of Virginia that don't even mention FOIA, but will say things like this record is confidential and it's a misdemeanor to release it, things like CPS records and whatnot. So we have to look throughout pretty much the entire code. You also have issues with FERPA and HIPAA, tax information, juvenile records, the Public Procurement Act. There are a bunch of laws out there. For the most part, a lot of information can go. For the most part, especially when we're dealing with FERPA or HIPAA issues, the requester is a parent or somebody guardian who would have the right to it anyway. But it is, especially when we are getting those news requests, that everyone has to be very careful. While we want to be as transparent as possible, the school also recognizes that they're children. Children have the right to a level of privacy, and parents want their children to have a level of privacy. All right, this is a fun exception that applies to you all. The school does have the option of does have the ability to charge for the cost of production of the records. So that's the time it takes to search and produce and redact, the cost of copying. If somebody wants paper copies, the cost of printing, that can all be in there. Interestingly, FERPA allows for the charging of these copyings as well. But the General Assembly has recently changed FOIA so that under FOIA, if it is a record that someone would be entitled to under FERPA, the school can no longer charge for that cost. So it's essentially voided the provision in FERPA that allows for the charging of those records. So think of any record that a parent or a child over the age of 18, an eligible student, could get that they would be entitled to under FERPA. The school can't charge for it anymore. And I touched on this a little bit briefly, how to request records. And the preferable one is to do it through the Just FOIA platform. I would like to reiterate, we can't tell someone they have to use the Just FOIA platform. FOIA doesn't require a FOIA request to be in writing. Like I mentioned, they can make it orally. They have that right to make it orally. It is easier to do it through the Just FOIA platform. Sometimes people find it easier because then they can have that direct communication. So there's no harm saying, I'm happy to take down all this information for you. Or if you would prefer to use our Just FOIA platform, you can. But if they decide that they want to continue giving it to you orally, they can continue giving the request orally. The request does have to state their name and a legal Virginia address, and it does have to identify with reasonable specificity what record it is they're looking for. So as soon as you get a FOIA request or a request for a record that you think, like I said, please send that on to your FOIA officer. Mr. Walker has his personal or his direct email, but it's always easiest to reach them, I think, at foia@nps.k12.va.us, because then you just have to remember the word FOIA and it'll go straight to him. And I'm just going to put words in his mouth, but I think he'd appreciate knowing as soon as possible so he can get the ball rolling on those 5 days.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
There you go. All right. So how can citizens enforce their FOIA rights? They can file a petition for mandamus, which is when a court would order a production or order somebody to do something. In the case of something like a public meeting that's being held, they can file a petition for an injunction to stop it. It does have to be supported by an affidavit showing good cause, but they can file in general district court or circuit court. General district court has a little form. It's very easy. It's supposed to be heard within 7 days of the date when the petition is made. And just in case I haven't harped enough on this topic that FOIA is important to the people and to the General Assembly did something very strange in our American system, which is they moved the burden of proof. So I think we're all generally aware of this idea that a defendant in a civil or criminal case, the burden of proof starts with the person who has brought the suit. In a case of a FOIA case against a public body, the burden of proof has shifted to the public body. It's still a preponderance of the evidence standard, but the burden is now on the public body. So FOIA is incredibly important. It is a priority for the General Assembly, and so it should be a priority for all public bodies. And there are some penalties, and we get into this. This is not to scare you in any sort of way, but they are there. A willful and knowing violation of FOIA can result in a civil penalty of between $500 and $2,000. It gets paid to the literary fund, and a second violation goes up in price. If it's a record, if there's a failure to provide the record because the record was altered or destroyed with the intent to avoid FOIA. So not because, the records are subject to the records retention, to the Public Records Act of Virginia, which sets records retention schedules, which means certain records do have to be destroyed. And they are supposed to be destroyed on a certain basis, and that's all set out by the Library of Virginia. So if a record was just destroyed because we're following along with the schedule, and it's not with this intent to avoid FOIA, that's not what we're talking about. The sheer fact that a record can't be found or doesn't exist doesn't mean somebody's violated FOIA. However, if you get a FOIA request, somebody got a FOIA request for a record, and the next day the record went missing, and it was there the day before, I think a court might ask a couple questions. And for meetings that are not compliant for those requirements about how to close a meeting, there can be a civil penalty of up to $1,000 paid to the literary fund, which is imposed on the public body. If a violation is found, the petitioner is also entitled to recover reasonable costs, including legal fees. So that is also something to always keep in mind. A FOIA violation can be brought against the individual. So somebody could bring a FOIA lawsuit against the school board in general, or they might bring it against you individually. So that is why we do these trainings. The FOIA statutes are all available online on LIS. If you're ever curious about something, it just lives open on my desktop, and I'll control F words and just make sure that we're doing everything as well as we can. But because it does have that individual issue, I do always want to make sure that that is clear, that it's on you. If you have been asked if a record exists, please check for the record. Please make a reasonable effort to try to find it. All right, some interesting updates. Let's see. I don't think many of these, if you'd like to hear me being a legal nerd about some of these updates, I'm more than happy to do so. But not many of them, with that exception of the change for FERPA accessible records, are really specific to the school board. There was another change that has been very helpful too, which is if a committee is formed and it happens to have 3 members of a different public body appointed to it, the sheer fact that those 3 are now part of this committee does not make them attending that committee meeting a meeting of the prior board. So if 3 members of the school board are appointed to a committee on attendance, and the committee on attendance is noticed and the 3 school board members show up, it is not now a meeting of the school board. It used to be. It used to be 2 meetings happening at once because you had 3 school board members. But when the General Assembly went through and changed the definitions to include public business and whatnot, they looked at that and they're like, they're there for that committee. That committee's been noticed. The members of that committee are publicly available to the citizens. There's no transparency harm as long as the committee's been noticed. So it's no longer a school board meeting, which, again, your clerk is a little bit happy about because now she only has to notice 1 meeting. She doesn't have to notice 2 at the exact same time and place. All right. And then I am going to spend a little bit of time talking about the Conflict of Interest Act. This is not your official Conflict of Interest Act training. You are, like FOIA, local elected officials are required to participate in Conflict of Interest Act training, and it must be, where are we at? With, again, same amount of time, within 2 months after assuming the local office, and thereafter at least once during each consecutive period of 2 calendar years while you hold such office, commencing on the date you last completed the training session. While FOIA allows me as the local body's attorney to provide the training for you, the Conflict of Interest Act has to be provided to you by the Virginia Conflict of Interest and Ethics Advisory Council. Theirs is online. So you can do that at your discretion. We will make sure you get a copy to the link for where you can just go and at your convenience, as long as it's within those 2 months of assuming office. So that's even if you've been reelected, you still have to redo it within those 2 months. And we'll make sure if you haven't already gotten that link, you can. And you get a nice little certificate at the end. And just make sure your clerk gets a copy of that too.
But the name is not on it.
Your name isn't on it?
Yeah.
There is no personal penalty if you haven't completed the COIA training. You should. So I'm always loath to say that. You're supposed to do it. But just make sure that when you get a copy of that certificate, you send it to your clerk and say, I completed it on this day. Here's my certificate. And she'll keep track of that for you. All right. And why it's not required. Or this isn't your required training. Now, why I still want to do this, even though this does not count as your training, is because the Conflict of Interest Act, not that FOIA isn't important, I probably said that enough times, I think, but unlike FOIA, the Conflict of Interest Act can carry criminal penalties if it's been violated, so it is incredibly important. Again, this isn't to scare you off, it is just to keep your attention on it so you're paying attention closely while you're doing this COIA training. There can be, it is a misdemeanor, a class 1 misdemeanor, which can result in jail time of no more than 12 months or a fine of no more than $2,500, either or both. There are different exceptions too. I'll get into a little bit more detail, but there are some that are considered a class 3 misdemeanor, which have lesser jail time and a lesser fee. But at the end of the day, there can still be criminal penalties. Don't think anybody really cares if it's a class 1, a class 2, a class 3. Matters is it's not good. So we want to avoid that. And in addition to these, anybody who knowingly violates any provision of COIA is also guilty of malfeasance in office or employment. They may order the forfeiture. A judge, if someone is found guilty, can order the forfeiture of the office and employment. There's a whole other list of penalties that can come with that specific crime. And in case this wasn't scary enough, there is also a civil penalty that can be imposed in addition to that $2,500. And that can be in the amount equal to the amount of value or thing of value that was received as a result of the violation. It's even if the General Assembly decides to increase the value of what you're allowed to accept, which I'm going to get into in a little bit of time, fortunately then the greater value decides the amount of the civil penalty, but still you can have that civil penalty in that amount, and whatever it is that you've received that was a thing of value could be ordered to be forfeited. There are disclosure forms that I think you've all already received. You will continue to receive them, yes. And there is, in addition to that norm, and an exception to that other civil penalty rule, there's yet another version of the penalty for COIA, which says that anyone who's required to file the disclosure form and fails to file it within the period of time is assessed a civil penalty equal to $250. So, what? All right, I've got another penalty. I'm sorry. Anyone who knowingly and intentionally makes a false statement of a material fact on the statement of economics interest is guilty of a Class 5 felony, which is, I've listed it down there too. Now, the statute of limitations for it is 1 year from the time that the attorney for the Commonwealth finds out about it, has actual knowledge of the violation, or 5 years from the date of the violation. And then, like I mentioned, a malfeasance of office is a separate criminal offense as well. Okay, so what is it that we need to be aware of to avoid all of these penalties, the actual context of it? And it goes back again to that idea of transparency and that the government is there for the people. So the guiding policy of COIA is that the entire system of representative government in America is based on the idea of citizen legislative members who are representing the public fully, that the citizens must be able to maintain the highest trust in their public officers and employees. And so therefore they are entitled to be assured that the judgment of public officers and employees is guided by a law that defines and prohibits inappropriate conflicts and requires disclosure of economic interests. So therefore, COIA has been established. You have to do this training, and it's not just a part of a one-time thing that you do once every 2 years. You are required to read and familiarize yourself with the provisions of this chapter. So at all times, you are expected to have knowledge of COIA and everything that it includes. All right, so there is generally prohibited conduct, and there is a whole list of them that I'm going to go through pretty fast. Like I said, it's all online. You'll get it in your specific trainings. This first one is really, I think, what encapsulates the theme of everything that's going to follow, which is no officer or employee of a state or local governmental or advisory agency shall solicit or accept money or other things of value for services performed within the scope of your official duties, except the compensation, expenses, or other remuneration paid by the agency of which you're an officer or employee. So the idea is you are civil servants, essentially, at this point. You are there to serve the people, we're not here to get fringe benefits, to get perks, to get anything like that. It is there for the sake of serving the people. So to that end, there's a few more. These always apply no matter what, and this is a section to always keep coming back to. That includes accepting something of value to help somebody obtain employment, an appointment, a position, a contract, anything of economic benefit for another person. This is the big one that I think can be the most, that I would be the most wary with, which is accepting anything that seems to reasonably tend to influence you in the performance of your official duties. So this even comes down to accepting honoraria for appearances, speeches, or articles where you're opining on your official duties. That unfortunately that doesn't apply to you, but it applies to the governor and the lieutenant governor. But again, that's why I say you always have to go back to that idea that you're not supposed to be receiving any compensation beyond what you're actually being paid by law for what you are doing. Can't use your position to retaliate or threaten to retaliate against someone. This gets out of the money views of it, but it is also in there. And so the general idea is you can't accept a gift. And what this term gift is, it's pretty lengthy. They try to cover everything, and then they just summed it up with saying basically anything of monetary value. There are then 17 separate exceptions to that because they want to keep you active. You're the school board, you like education. So they want you to look through it. They are context and case specific. And our office is here if you have a question about if one of these exemptions applies to a gift. We are happy to help. The Ethics Council has an attorney who is incredibly responsive. She is always willing to listen to the facts and see what she can do as well. So you've got us as your first round of advice, and then we also have her that we can fall back on whenever there's any questions. This isn't to say you can't ever accept gifts. It's kind of like FOIA. It's not to say that you can't ever talk to each other. COIA has a limit. It's all supposed to, the limit is that you can't solicit, accept, or receive a single gift with a value in excess of $100 or any combination of gifts with an aggregate value in excess of $100 within a calendar year. And FOIA says that that is $20. So if you are given something of value that is $20 or more, that counts towards your $100. And you can only have $100 from that person, entity that is giving you a gift. And here are the 3 exceptions to it. You can get gifts from your family. That's allowed. You can get gifts from your personal friends. That's allowed. That doesn't count towards this $100. But it does include a lobbyist registered pursuant to the Code of Virginia, a lobbyist principal as defined in the Code of Virginia, which includes the City of Norfolk. I will tell you that the City of Norfolk is a lobbyist's principal. So you can't accept gifts from the City of Norfolk in excess of $100 per calendar year. And then any person, organization, or business who is or is seeking to become a party to a contract with the school board. This applies to your immediate family members as well. So if you want to gather them around when it's time to do the COIA training and have them watch it, you can. Or you can just let them know if you guys are receiving gifts. Let me know who and where they're from. If it is in excess of $100, it has to be reported for if it's allowed to still be accepted. So I'm trying to think of the most coherent way to say this. You are limited to the $100. There are certain situations, like if it's a widely attended event, which is an event at which at least 25 people have been invited to attend, or there's a reasonable expectation 25 people will show up, because not everybody always shows up. And then it is an event that's opened to any of these 3 entities. The members of these types of organizations are from a particular industry or profession or represent someone interested in a particular issue. You can attend those events. And the value of attending this widely attended event, if it's a ticket, if it's something along those lines, can be in excess of $100 as long as that event meets this definition. But you have to report that. You have to report that on your disclosure form. Again, it comes down to this idea of transparency with the people. I would note this definition changed a few years ago, probably 7 years ago now. And so I will try to be as clear as possible. A person who represents persons interested in a particular issue, that doesn't mean going to a basketball game because you're all interested in whether or not your team wins. It was specifically changed to exclude those kinds of events, football games, basketball games, concerts, wine tastings, things along those lines. Just the sheer fact that everybody is interested in what's happening on stage does not make it a widely attended event. So please, if you've been invited to one of these and you're not paying for your own ticket, if somebody's offered you the ticket for free, talk to us. Ask us if it's okay to go. We'll be more than happy to walk you through whether it is or it's not, and if it needs to be reported or if it doesn't. But again, even with this in mind, even when it is something like a widely attended event that can go over the $100, even if it is a gift that is below $20, so it doesn't technically count as a gift, remember you still have those general prohibitions we talked about at the beginning, which means that there is a prohibition against receiving anything of value other than your set salary or defined benefit for your work. So just because it doesn't necessarily fall into these specific categories of the $100, or if it's within your $100, always keep that in mind. At the end of the day, even if it's $5, don't do it. Accidents happen. You can cure an unlawful gift. So if, it's, like I mentioned, this also implies if it's a family member who's kind of accepting these, But if you or somebody you found out has accepted a gift in violation of this chapter, it's not a violation as long as the gift or its monetary equivalent is returned or delivered to a charitable organization within a reasonable period of time. And then it's not claimed as a charitable contribution on your federal tax returns. Or you could just pay for it. So like I said, you can still go to these parties, you can still go to these concerts and events, just pay your own way type of attitude. There are other other exceptions for contracts. You can have a personal interest in a contract. This comes up a little bit more sneakily, I think, sometimes than a gift. I think it's obvious when somebody's trying to give you something of value. But a personal interest in a contract can mean a financial benefit or liability accruing to you or to a member of your immediate family because of that contract. It exists for a number of reasons that are outlined in the code. That includes ownership in business. If the ownership exceeds a certain percent, if the annual income exceeds or would be anticipated to exceed a specific amount. Salary, fringe benefits that are that same amount, which I think is $5,000. Ownership of real or personal property if the interest exceeds $5,000 in value. Personal liability can also count as a personal interest in a transaction or an option for ownership of a business or real or personal property if it kicks you back to those above. So a personal interest in a contract is defined by the state code as a personal interest that you have in a contract with your governmental agency. So if a contract comes before the school board and it is something you have a personal interest in, there are requirements for how you either have to recuse yourself from it, or in certain situations you can just disclose on the record that you may have this personal interest, but you are able to proceed without any conflict. There are procedures that your school board has for how to do those things. Again, there is an understanding, it appears by the General Assembly, that you live and work in this community. Your homes, your families are here, your jobs are here. You need to still be able to function without the body shutting down every single time a contract comes before it. But we still need to be transparent to the public about what's happening, which is why in certain situations it is possible to have a personal interest in either a contract or in a transaction and still proceed with participating in the vote on that contract or transaction as long as it's disclosed. And there will be much detail and examples in your official COIA training, and I won't take up your time with those. But just remember, again, our office is here to always help you through. If you think you have a personal interest in a contract or any type of transaction that's coming before the school board, let one of us know, and we'll be happy to talk you through what to do and what not to do. These are all specific examples. Like I said, I'm not going to get into them in detail for you, just so you can see there are a number. But there are also exceptions to them. So this is the one that I had sort of mentioned. If you are a member if you have a personal interest in a transaction, you can still participate as long as you file certain disclosure requirements. Those disclosure requirements are located in State Code 2.2-3115. It is all clearly spelled out there. The General Assembly tries to use as layman's term as possible and avoid legalese, so it is actually very friendly of a statute to read. I'd always ask. And do we have any questions? I'll make sure that Ms. Tanner has a copy of that link, and she will send it out to you so you all can complete your COIA training. And you obviously know Mr. Fox and Mr. Cloud if you have questions, but I'm here as well. Our whole office is here. If you need help, just feel free to reach out. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll move to agenda item 2.02, School Board Goal Number 5, Interim Measure Number 3.
Thank you, Chair DeCalagero, Ms. Thomas, Vice Chair, members of the board. This afternoon, the administration has prepared a couple of reports for you. The first is around our school board goal number 5, interim measure number 3, and Dr. Pohl, our Chief Academic Officer, is ready to present that data to you.
Ms. Tanner,
We put the wrong one up.
I had emailed you on this one earlier today. This is, here we go. Sorry. You got it.
Yeah.
All right. Good afternoon, School Board Chair DeCalagero, Vice Chair Ms. Thomas, members of the board, and Dr. Birdsong. This afternoon, we'll follow up from our last meeting and finish the third interim measure for the fifth goal, which is a focus on students, increasing the amount of students that graduate with an advanced studies diploma. In measure 5.3 specifically, and I do apologize, I noticed there's a typo here. This is supposed to be the 32% on the paragraph that's in the data as well. It's 32%, not 34%. My apologies on that. In this measure, specifically 32% of the 2025 graduating cohort will successfully complete the appropriate courses to be on track to graduate with the Advanced Studies Diploma by the end of the current school year. So as a reminder, this is our oldest cohort that we started tracking, so they were already well established into their high school careers when we started tracking this data. So as the data does show, the 2025 cohort has a lower rate than the first quarter of SY24 by 0.9 points, so there are fewer students on track right now. And currently, the highest percentage of the 2026 cohort, 2025 cohort that can reach this is 32% based on the metric devised for this measure. What's going well, based on course enrollment for students in the 25 cohort, the rate can increase 2.2 points from the final rate at the end of 2024 school year. So we can still see a little increase based on their enrollment, but not as much growth. There was a decline of 5.4 points from the final grades from SY24 to the first quarter SY25. And due to the courses cohort 25 students are enrolled in, the final target for this year is 2 points lower than last year based on the metric that's being used to determine success. So a few next steps, and these are somewhat similar, using the district recommended remediation practices and post-test procedures throughout the year, using district recommended backwards design protocols and providing timely feedback to students and parents. We've shared lists of the 2025 cohort members that could still be on track but are not because of their grades at the moment. And then this course selection process for our seniors, we're into the second semester now, but some of them could have taken a virtual course to try to make something up that we had tried to push as well. So that's the conclusion of the update on measure 5.3.
Are there any questions?
Thank you, Dr. Pohl, for the presentation and for the information, and I appreciate you and Dr. Birdsong for providing additional information on the questions that I had posed prior to the meeting, so that was very helpful to me, and I think, again, would be useful to have in the progress report as well. One question I have, one additional question beyond that I have is around when you're creating a shared list of students, is that a digital, do we have a database that we're able to do it so that it's not burdensome on our counselors or?
Yeah, so we provide it to the counselors centrally.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay,
So Mr. Brady and his team provide that.
okay. And has there been any discussion about like auto-enrolling students so that, because last week, well, I was actually meeting with a legislator, there's several bills around math. And so there's one around auto-enrollment. And so we were talking about it a little more, and I was thinking, and I was with a group of board members from other districts too, and I know some districts have policies in place where students are auto-enrolled, which they have found to increase access to advanced programming, but also, and then, longitudinally, they've seen it reduce achievement gaps. So I was just wondering, like, is that something that Norfolk has considered in the past? And if is that a strategy that could be put in place to help increase access and I guess retention in the advanced courses?
So, to my knowledge, we have not auto-enrolled student. However, the program that we follow is when they meet with their counselors, is that the counselors really do try to push the courses to put them on the highest course of studies that they can have. With our registration process, as you're probably well aware as a parent, is the registration happens, then notice goes home to verify and check the course registration, and that's where a lot of changes are made from time to time, coming back up. It could be a strategy that we could look into. I think also, as discussed at the last meeting, as we transition into 4x4, I think opportunities are going to change for students anyway. And we've already had those discussions around how we can do language quicker for better acquisition. And that is our biggest barrier is the world language. So as we look at that, if that's still not making the difference, possibly looking to something like an auto-enroll would be feasible.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Poole.
My pleasure.
Move on to agenda item 2.02, 2.03, school board non-negotiable number 2, interim measure 2.1 and interim measure 2.2.
All right. And for this one, I also have my wonderful colleague, Dr. Agnew Scott, here for questions on the follow-up, but I will present the report as always. So for non-negotiable 2, this focuses on the superintendent not allowing underperforming schools to have low teacher fill rates for prolonged periods of time or make extensive use of substitutes, low-performing or provisionally licensed staff without implementing high-impact strategies. Underperforming schools are defined as schools that are accredited with conditions, which we know will still be soon changing that language as the accreditation accountability system comes in, or maybe not, based on a bill that's out there, who knows? And low-performing teachers are defined as teachers on performance improvement plans. Specifically with this one, Measure 2.1 focuses on decreasing the percentage of schools accredited with conditions that are not fully staffed with licensed teachers by the first day of school from 83.3% in the fall of 2022 to 0% in the fall of 2027. And as the data show, as the first day of this academic year, we had 18 schools that were accredited with conditions, and none of them were fully staffed with licensed teachers, which gave us a 57-point gap from the target. What's going well since the first day of school, 78% of the identified schools have now reported 0 classroom vacancies, so we've seen hiring since the first day of school. In many cases, associate teachers are obtaining licensure, therefore the number of licensed teachers is gradually increasing for those schools as well. And additionally, teacher recruitment and hiring continues, further reducing the vacancy count as schools accredited with our schools with credited with conditions. What's not going well is that none of the identified schools were fully staffed by the first day of school for SY 2025. And although the process is being made in the staffing of school, or progress is being made in the staffing of schools as associate teachers complete their programs, there are typically very few licensed and properly endorsed applicants in the candidate pool early in the hiring season to fill all the positions that we have. So next steps, human resources staff are prioritizing schools according to need. Therefore, recruitment efforts will revolve around the sourcing and hire of licensed teachers for schools accredited with conditions and for our equity and excellence schools, equity and excellence learning centers. Early contracts will be issued to proactively secure licensed candidates for these schools, and innovative marketing strategies such as geofencing and geofarming are being used to advertise employment opportunities in Norfolk Public Schools in many different states across the nation. So that's the conclusion of Measure 2.1.
Are there any questions?
Again, yes. Again, thank you for the presentation and for responding to the questions that I had posed regarding some of the clarifying questions I had here. And just for my board colleagues to know, so this non-negotiable was put in place to kind of so that we could examine what schools, certain schools have higher vacancy rates than others. And so this was a way of, and if you go up to the table, so, and this particular one is focused on those that are, I guess, identified schools. So, or should I say like harder to staff?
No,
I mean, is that I mean.
The schools that were identified were schools that were accredited with conditions.
Well, correct.
Correct.
But a lot of those have been harder to staff, is what I'm saying. I mean, right? Wouldn't you say?
Dr.
mean-
Agnew Scott?
Yeah.
Some, but not all. It just depends on the school, and we have seen that there are several schools that are in this category who have 0 vacancies. So it just depends on the school and various other factors.
And like you, I think, had clarified in the questions that I had asked, so the vacancy rate currently, as it is written in this monitoring report, does include the associate teachers.
Correct.
Right, so that's also something that, it's a wonderful, wonderful program, and I was heartened to see the retention rate among the associate teachers and how many were in the program and trying to advance. So I think that's a great start. One thing we also may want to keep an eye on too is the percentage of associate teachers in those schools that are identified, as right now that we're calling it accredited with conditions, but going forward, may be classified, they're classified differently, but because we were trying to not have those schools that have a greater percentage of students with greater need have a higher percentage of less experienced, less certified teachers, so if that makes sense. So that was what was behind this. But again, I appreciate the feedback that you provided to the questions that I asked ahead of time, and I don't have anything further right now.
Thank you.
Question. Is there any way we can get a list by the names, the schools?
Yes, you can.
Yeah. And
We'll provide that for you.
Yeah, and can I so you may not have seen, but we get an HR report every month, which Ms. Tanner usually sends out. So that has, the school by school. It has the vacancy rate, how many associate teachers, certified teachers, and it tells you also, like by subject area, grade level. There's a different tables within that. So you should be getting that every month too, ahead of this business meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bless you.
We're going to motion to go into closed executive session.
I'm sorry, Mr. Kite, we have one more.
Oh, you have one more?
sorry.
Please excuse me. 2 point, that's right. You do have two goals.
My apologies for interrupting. So again, good afternoon, and we'll roll into the second measure of the same non-negotiable, and that is the percentage of underperforming schools with low teacher fill rates or making extensive use of substitutes or low performing that do not have a high-impact staffing strategy in place. So this data is trending in the right direction. The progress being made, 7.8 points from the 2025 target. So you can see the gap is smaller, but we are trending up. So what's going well here? Since the first day of school, 6 of the identified schools are now reporting either one or no classroom vacancies. So we have seen even improvement since the first day of school. In many cases, associate teachers are obtaining their license, just like with the last one. And additionally, the recruitment is reducing the vacancy count at our schools that are accredited with conditions. What's not going well, although the progress being made with staffing, the associate teachers complete their programs. There are typically very few licensed, properly endorsed applicants early in the hiring season. And there are still 12 identified schools with more than one teacher vacancy. So next steps are a little similar, but there's a couple differences. The human resources are prioritizing according to need. The teacher residency programs are being initiated in various schools through grant opportunities. This enables the teacher pipeline to be filled with teacher candidates who work side by side with a Norfolk Public Schools classroom teacher to learn the craft of teaching while working towards their degree and licensure. Spring hiring fairs will occur on hiring teachers for these schools for next school year. And we're continuing to review the data of the strategies in place in order to consider adding high-impact strategies to additional schools. And that concludes this one.
Are there any questions?
I don't have a question, but I have a statement. In order to have this done, our next step, we have to take care of other things that's going on in other departments so we can get to this point. So are we looking at that?
I'm not sure the direction of the question, Ms. Thomas.
Far as other departments like security and other departments,
Staffing,
right,
support staff
Oh.
position.
in order to get to this, because we're not gonna get to this.
Are you talking about for the staffing of all the other departments?
Yes.
Oh, of course, ma'am. We're looking at the staffing of all of our areas. This is this is focused on this specific measure because it was directed towards the board, non-negotiable.
Ms. Thomas, just like the report we get every month, we will get one as far as staffing as well, for this, on the support staff, so you'll be able to see that as well.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cole.
All right, thank you.
Now we will make a motion to go into closed executive session.
I move we go into closed session. I second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, everybody said aye? Okay, that's fine. Okay, move that the members of the school board of the city of Norfolk go into a closed session for the purposes which are set out in subsection A of section 2.2-3711 of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act as amended 4, discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific public officers, appointees, or employees of the school board pursuant to subsection 2.2-3711A1 of the Act. The subjects of this portion of the session are the discussion of personnel on today's regular personnel agenda and of candidates for temporary appointment to the board seat representing Ward 3 pending the November 25th special election. Discussion or consideration of disciplinary and other matters concerning students in Norfolk Public Schools that would involve the disclosure of information contained in the scholastic record pursuant to subsection 2.2-3711A2 of the Act. The subject of this portion of the session is the discussion of students on today's regular student support agenda and consultation with legal counsel and briefing by staff members pertaining to actual or probable litigation or regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by counsel pursuant to subsections 2.2-3711A7 and 8 of the Act. The subjects of this portion of the closed session are for the legal advice in connection with the matters set above in subsections A and B of this motion. And you all said aye, or do I need to continue?
Aye.
Aye. So moved.
All right. Call the business meeting to order. Ms. Tanner, will you please do the roll call?
Basine?
Here.
Buffalo?
Here.
Martin?
Present.
Colson?
Here.
Thomas?
Here.
Calagero?
Here. We all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. 4.04, adoption of the business meeting agenda. Do we have a motion to adopt the business meeting agenda?
I move that we adopt the business meeting agenda.
I second. Thank you.
Okay.
Board moves that we adopt the business meeting agenda?
Madam Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to clarify that the personnel docket was already.
Yes, it
Yes,
was.
okay. Sorry, thank you.
All right. Do we need to do a roll call?
Basine?
Aye.
Buffalo?
Yes.
Martin?
Aye.
Paulson?
Aye.
Thomas?
Aye.
DeCalagero?
Aye. Now we'll move on to section 4.05, school board clerk's report, recognition of the Maury High School football team.
Yes, and before we call them forward, we would like to give a special thank you to the talented culinary arts students at Maury High School for the delicious dinner tonight. We dined on spinach and cheese stuffed chicken breast over yellow rice, baked spaghetti, and tossed garden salad, and had a special sweet treat with lemon pound cakes and cheesecake. So you guys stay awake up here. Prepared under the direction and leadership of Chef Gaynor. Wave, Chef Gaynor.
Yes.
And our Culinary Arts Department Chair, Allison Copeland. And our talented culinary students who prepared this meal includes Aubrey Kochi, Rihanna Williams, Anaya Marshall, and Aubrey is going to give some quick remarks tonight. Let's give her some encouragement.
Good evening. My name is Aubrey Cohey, and I'm a junior at Maury High School and a second-year culinary student. Culinary arts can mean a lot of different things depending on the way you interpret it. It often represents creativity, a way to express oneself through flavor and techniques. For some, it's about mastering skills and the joy of cooking, while for others, it might involve the science of ingredients and the magic of transforming them into something extraordinary. For me, it's a connection to culture and history and a sense of community as food brings people together. Whether I'm crafting a dish for family and friends or collabing with my fellow culinary students in class, it's a shared experience that goes beyond the plate, creating more memories and connections. Over the last 2 years of my culinary class, I have developed many skills which have boosted my self-confidence in and outside of classrooms. It has allowed me to be more creative in expressing myself. It has enhanced my knowledge of food and has made me more aware of making better choices and understanding the impact of food on my well-being as it relates to my health and safety. Cooking requires multitasking and planning. I have developed better organizational and time management skills. Lastly, I had an opportunity to explore the cultural significance of various dishes, which has fostered a greater appreciation for diverse culinary traditions. And thank you for allowing me to share a glimpse of what culinary means to me.
Awesome job. Next, we are excited to recognize our Maury High School football team who won back-to-back Class 5 state championships under the leadership of Coach McCain and his phenomenal coaching staff. Also present with us today is Principal Karen Berg. Come on in, Karen Berg. Athletic Director Tommy Staples. And our Senior Coordinator of Athletics, Steve Sutmiller. Now I'd like to ask the board members to please come to the step and repeat. And Board Chair, if you could come here at the end of this dais for me. I'm going to show you where to line up at. Keep it simple. Players going to line up over there. This is the first one. All right. And now, okay. And now, let's give a warm round of applause and recognize the game-winning coach of the Maury Commodores, Coach McCain. Come on in. We want to thank you for your service, for your teamwork, and your phenomenal work. Okay? And next, the coaches who worked with you every day to build your championship team. When I call your name, please come forward. Let me see that. Sarah, let me see that real quick. When I call your name, please come forward. Y'all keep clapping now. Keep the fun going. Second. Were all the coaches here? Oh, just you. What's your name? Coach Warren Davis. Coach Davis, you're going to be the representative to hold this for the other coaches and then shake the superintendent's hand. I'm going to hold on to just 1 second, Sarah. Okay. And next, we have our phenomenal team players. Put your hands together for our back-to-back championship Maury High School Commodore football team. Oh, we also have, are the managers, wait a minute, before we call the team, are the managers here? Yes. Can our managers come through? Let's give them a warm round of applause. Okay, we have Joshua Bowe. You can be the representative to hold that for the team. Leon Clark. Leslie Hines. Daniel Jones. Amarius Mitchell. Autori Newkirk. Cameron Simmons. Isaiah Simmons. Naziar Tate. Larique Teasley, and Javon Wynn. Give them a round of applause. We can do better than that. Congratulations. We want to get some pictures. Mr. Walker, if you can come forward and get pictures. And then after that, we're going to let Coach McCain come and say a few remarks about this back-to-back championship team. We got to get Sarah in. Yeah. Board members, we need you guys to come to the front. There you go. There you go. Kaylani, come on in. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yes, more in the middle is good. All right.
All right, look at me, please. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And get one for social media.
Oh, well, thank you.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Excellent.
And everybody stay in place so Coach McCain can share a few words. Coach McCain, everybody stay in place. Coach McCain wants to share just a few remarks about this championship season.
Go, Coach. Woo!
All right, well, good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
All right. We appreciate you guys inviting us, having us here. It's been a long journey. Certain guys that we do have here are our seniors and our captains. The reason I have them here is because these are the guys who paved the way and did the back-to-back. It's the first time in school history that it's been done. So I just felt like it was important for these guys to kind of get their shine in today for something they've done. Usually you see these guys in helmets, so you don't get to see their face. So today I wanted to make sure that these guys were known. A lot of our seniors aren't here today because a lot of them are already enrolled at their school at South Carolina, Indiana, Clemson, Maryland. Just to name a few, that's where some of those guys are now. So we're missing a few, but I just felt like it was important for these guys to kind of get their shine. They did something that's never been done. They'll forever be remembered in history. Hopefully they go and make history in their lives as men, and our two managers that we have here as women. So hopefully the program set them up for success, and hopefully they enjoy success at this level and go make it into their adulthood life in their 20s and 30s. So let's make history in that. That's kind of the biggest goal for them moving forward. So good milestone here, great, but let's do it in life when we finish and graduating. And we appreciate y'all.
Congratulations to your student athletes. Congratulations. Thank you all so much. Thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you for being here. Thank you, guys. Okay. Thank you. That's fine.
Oh, sorry, Ms. Alfreda, I keep forgetting.
Now I'd like to move to agenda item 4.06, the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Chair DeCalagero, Vice Chair Thomas, members of the board, staff, and community. As you know, every month we have a video that we would like to share with you to share all of the exciting things that are taking place in Norfolk Public Schools. This month's video happens to highlight the Future Leaders Education Day. It was the first time ever with Norfolk State and our children, and we were very happy to participate with that. Our continued school-to-school attendance challenge. So I want to thank our teachers and building principals for making this a priority because it is one of our big rocks, and I know it takes a lot of time to take daily attendance, but we do it, and we've been doing a great job with it, and we have watched our data significantly increase because of our focus on that. We also will have some clips of our Teacher of the Year program, which was very, very exciting. Most of you in the room were there and participated in that event, and it was just a lovely, lovely event. And so without further ado, there are a couple of other clips in there that you'll enjoy watching. So Channel 47, please roll the video.
Students from every middle school in the division visited Norfolk State University for their Future Leaders Education Day. They got a real taste of college by watching NSU's Lady Spartans defeat Shaw University in basketball.
This is, at the middle school level, they need to start to see experiences, and just to be on a college campus the experience, what these student athletes are going through is the number one thing.
It's awesome. It's good for them to see that, what it is to be in college. It's not just studying and all that. But we also want them to know it's about being educated. It's about being a scholar and about getting their degree.
The Willard Model Sharks went swimming around in dolphin territory just before winter break when they tapped Suburban Park Elementary for the NPS School Attendance Challenge. The Dolphins picked up after break with a Mardi Gras themed spirit week that featured lots of beads and masks as they demonstrated perfect attendance and a mantra to show up and shine. The week concluded with a festive parade when the Dolphins handed over the flag to Crossroads School. Across the division, schools are creatively and enthusiastically highlighting the importance of being present, on time, and ready to learn each day. Proving that attendance counts at NPS. This friendly competition underscores a vital message. When students miss school, they miss out. Chronic absenteeism, missing 10% or more of school days for any reason, has a significant impact on learning. It can hinder early reading skills, middle school achievement, and even high school graduation. As part of the School to School Attendance Challenge, NPS recognizes the schools that are leading the way in combating chronic absenteeism. Congratulations to the following schools for having the best attendance and for earning the most improved attendance for the month of December. Keep up the great work.
Some of our best and brightest teachers were at the Doubletree Hotel for our annual Citywide Teacher of the Year ceremony. 56 teachers, along with the school board, central administration. Principals and families enjoyed dinner and a performance by the Strolling Silver Strings. Excitement mounted throughout the night as Superintendent Dr. Sharon Birdsong announced what we were all waiting for.
Ladies and gentlemen, please rise and join me in a joyful and enthusiastic applause for the 2026 Norfolk Public Schools Citywide Teacher of the Year, Miss Catherine Flanagan.
Pretty amazing. I really didn't expect it. I heard all those amazing teachers the other two, and it hasn't quite sunk in yet. I'm so proud and grateful to be among these excellent educators and to be considered one of the best with them, as a Teacher of the Year.
Also named were the middle and high school teachers of the year.
I feel so honored, and I feel like it's an out-of-body experience. Like, I can't believe that I'm here. I've only been teaching for 5 years. I never imagined that I would ever be in a room with so many wonderful educators.
It feels great. It's an honor. I'm very grateful. It just means so much. It makes me feel like the work that I'm doing is being recognized, and I'm just looking forward to doing more work in computer science. I really want computer science to be accessible for all.
Norfolk Public Schools spent time prior to the winter break giving back to the community. School nutrition provided a variety of shelf-stable foods along with fresh produce to families with children experiencing food insecurity during their second annual winter food pantry distribution. Donations from community partners, including Old Dominion University and PETA, enabled them to distribute approximately 5,000 pounds of food to over 200 households. Over at Grandy Village, the Early Learning Title I department was busy making others' holidays a bit brighter. After loading a school bus with gifts from the Salvation Army at Greenbrier Mall, they packed them together with food and books at the Grandy Village Learning Center. Our high schools sent over their choruses to spread some Yuletide cheer, while Title I staff members delivered items to cars as they pulled up to the Learning Center.
Special shout out to the Department of Student Wellness for their generous monetary donation to Seton Youth Services.
Please join us to discuss the proposed updates for the new Maury High School. With a focus on sustainability, coastal resilience, and community engagement, the project will preserve Maury's legacy while meeting the future needs of Maury students, teachers, and parents.
Attention all NPS families. Mark your calendars for Family University, happening Saturday, March 29th, 2025 at Booker T. Washington High School from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Join us for a day of hands-on learning and access to valuable resources designed to support your family's educational journey. Transportation and lunch are all provided, so bring the whole family. Don't miss this opportunity to grow, connect, and learn together at Family University.
For complete video stories and more division-wide information about Norfolk Public Schools, visit the NPS website and check out our YouTube channel, Facebook page, Instagram app, and the NPS newsletter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That concludes my video report.
Thank you. Now move to agenda item 4.07, citizens' comments.
Madam Chair, for today's citizen comments, we have 4 speakers. Today's speakers signed up for public comments before the start of today's business meeting. If you would like to provide public comments, you're required to state the agenda item or items or topic you are addressing prior to providing your public comments. When your name is called, please come forward to the speaker's podium, state your name and whether you have a child in Norfolk Public Schools or if you're employed by the district, and state your agenda item or items. One person is to speak at a time. If you're representing a group, state the group's name. You may ask your group members to stand in place to be recognized. Speaking time is limited to 3 minutes. A timer is set with an alarm that will signify the end of your speaking time. State your position and give facts and relevant data. Avoid saying anything that identifies students or personnel information about individual employees. Personnel, disciplinary, and confidential matters may be addressed to the school board directly via email at schoolboard@npsk12.com. Comments should be addressed to the board and not addressed to an individual member. School board members do not respond to public comments at the time they are given. Any written statements or supporting materials should be given to the clerk. Chairwoman DeCalagera, our first speaker for today is Charlotte Smith-Worley, followed by Precious White.
Good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, school board members, and Dr. Birdsong. My name is Charlotte Smith-Worley. I do not have children in Norfolk schools. I am a longtime advocate for adequate capital improvement of Norfolk schools. I am here this evening because I am hopeful the school board may be entering into a new era of collaboration and cooperation with the administrative leadership, as well as the community. My hope stems from the election that has brought 3 new members to the table and the impending appointment process that will bring a 4th. It is no secret that the previous version of the school board was divided. Many times, some members seemed to challenge the administration just to be contrary, rather than focus on the positive aspects of what the administration was trying to achieve. So I asked the new school board to sincerely commit to a new dynamic of cooperation and collaboration. That doesn't mean you need to rubber stamp everything the administration brings before you. It means that you review the recommendations with diligence and you make intelligent revisions and improve the input to involve the input of the entire school board. A perfect example of this would be the recommendation for converting Lake Taylor High School into a comprehensive career technical high school under a public charter. This would be a game-changing initiative for Norfolk Public Schools. What a great opportunity for this new board to come together to finally bring into reality at long last. Let me also ask the school board to refine its focus. Continuing the DRIVE strategic plan needs to be the guiding force of your work. Right now, there's a mishmash of so-called guiding principles, from non-negotiables written in a thou shalt not manner to school board goals that seem designed to cripple the administration. I support aspirational goals, but steady, incremental growth needs to be celebrated and not diminished. Finally, as you begin the process of interviewing for the vacant Ward 4 position, Listen for evaluative, shared philosophy. This may truly become a school board that your stakeholders deserve. Thank you.
Precious White. Oops, you okay, Jack? Precious White. Okay. Liz Albert.
Good evening, school board members and Dr. Birdsong. My name is Liz Albert. I do not have children in public schools. However, I am an officer of a local civic league who has long supported increased investment in Norfolk Public Schools. To the 3 new school board members, let me first say how glad I am that you are here. In the beginning of this new year, I feel some hope that it will not be business as usual for the Norfolk School Board. You see, the prior version of the board was not known for its transparency. I am hopeful you 3 will be the catalyst for needed change in that area. Earlier today, the school board received training on the Freedom of Information Act, which enforces the public's right to have access to government meetings and public records. If the new members are not familiar with FOIA law, I hope you took good notes. I and other citizens and the media are very watchful about how the school board and city council conduct business. We expect strict adherence to FOIA law. At this very moment, I'm awaiting a written opinion from the Virginia Freedom of Information Council regarding the violation of the public meeting requirements. The FOIA Council has already given me the verbal opinion that indeed 3 Norfolk School Board members did violate FOIA when they met with the school system's educational planning consultant at a conference last year and discussed high school redistricting. 2 of those members are still on the board and 1 has retired. I have asked for a written opinion because I believe it was a serious violation that spoke of a definite political agenda. It is probable this agenda will become apparent to the new board members once the school board grapples with impending decisions on closures and consolidations. After the training, I'm sure the new board members are keenly aware that 3 or more members of a public body cannot gather to discuss public business without adhering to public notification requirements. I also hope a commitment to transparency will be evident in the appointment process for the Ward 3 seat. Prior to the February 5th, the public deserves to see the resumes and applications of all applicants so we can weigh in on their qualifications. Therefore, based on FOIA law, I am verbally requesting copies of those resumes and applications in your possession. Again, let me say welcome to the new school board members. I hope you don't regard my remarks as negative, but instead see them as cautionary. I sincerely want the best version of a school board that Norfolk can possibly have. Thank you.
Michael Dyer.
Good evening, returning board members, chairperson, and welcome to the new board members. My name is Michael Dyer. I have no children attending Norfolk Public Schools, but I have been employed at Granby High School for the past 14 years. I stand before you tonight as a teacher, but as a representative for 12 NJROTC teachers in Norfolk, all of whom are facing serious issues that have been left unresolved for the past 8 months. I'm here to speak on behalf of my colleagues and to implore you to listen with an open mind and a commitment to fairness. Many of you may recall last year's school board budget had provisions for step pay raises for all full-time employees at Norfolk Public Schools. We were hopeful, expecting that each of us, depending on our hire date, would receive at least a step pay raise, if not more. But when contracts came, none of us saw those step increases reflected in our pay. I reached out to clarify the discrepancy with HR, only to be told that Navy NJRTC teachers were excluded from the pay raise. This was a blow to my colleagues and myself, and also to our morale. We are teachers. We serve our students, and we deserve to be treated with the same respect and fairness as the other teachers in the district. Pay increases are always a topic that requires thoughtful discussion. But tonight, I'm not here just to ask for a raise. I'm here to ask for fairness, for equality, and to demand the pay discrepancies between the Navy JROTC teachers and other staff members be addressed. Over the past 8 months, we have attempted to resolve these issues, but we have heard nothing but excuses. We were told we didn't receive the step increases because we were off step. However, surveying the teachers at my school, there were only 16 of them out of 162 that I surveyed that were on step. So this doesn't hold water. We were also told that our raises were not within the budget. However, our average salary paid by Norfolk Public Schools is less than $44,000, $14,000 less than a brand new teacher. And we average over 10 years of experience in teaching. This is not just a discrepancy, it's a disparity. And just last October, I received a letter from Dr. Agnew Scott stating that the immediate plans to change the compensation structure there were no immediate plans to change the compensation structure for NJROTC teachers. It was a long-standing practice. Let me ask you, should we continue to accept outdated practices and that permeate inequality? Should we continue to allow a system exist where certain teachers are undervalued and underpaid simply because the programs they teach? This issue is not just about pay, it's about dignity and respect. It's about ensuring that every educator, regardless of their role or subject, is compensated fairly and equitably. That's why I'm here tonight asking for your help. I thank you for your time, and I look forward to working with each of you to resolve this issue as soon as possible. Let's make Norfolk Public Schools a place where every educator, regardless of their position, is treated with respect, fairness, and dignity.
And a correction to our speakers, it's just 3.
All right, moving on to agenda item 4.08, approval of the consent agenda.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, the school board moves that we accept the consent agenda.
And I apologize, I was trying to flip the screen. Who made the original motion?
Dr.
Martin.
Dr.
Okay,
Martin.
thank you. All right, Basine?
Aye.
Buffalo?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye.
Paulson?
Aye.
Thomas?
Aye.
DeCalagero?
Aye. Move to agenda item 6.01, the monthly financial report.
Good evening, Chair DeCalagero, Vice Chair Thomas, school board members, and Dr. Birdsong. Tonight, I'm presenting the Period 6 financial highlights. This is the December report, which covers 6 months of the fiscal year that started July 1st, 2024. As this report reflects July through December transactions that were recorded on or before January 17th. Get the highlight page. As shown on the financial highlights page, the general fund collections for the first 6 months totaled $221.1 million and represents 47.3% of the annual general fund budget. Collections during the same period for the 2 previous years, ranged between 44 and 43% of the budget. Looking at the expenditure and encumbrances line, by the end of December, we spent or encumbered $218 million, or 46.8% of the budget. During the previous 2 years, spending through December 31st ranged between 41.4% and 46%. As shown on the bottom line of the financial highlights, you can see that at this point in the year, actual revenue collections are $2.5 million above expenditures and encumbrances. Following the financial summary are detailed pages that provide more detail for the general fund budget. There were no general fund budget transfers exceeding $50,000 during the month of December. Our next report is the quarterly grants report. So, looking at the quarterly grants report, as of December 31st, we had $117 million of grants in progress, of which $60 million was spent or encumbered. We had one grant, it's the top one on the schedule, the American Rescue Plan HVAC grant. It had an end date of December 31st of 2024 and was 100% spent by the deadline on the HVAC project at Booker T. Washington High School. 54.9% of the $86 million in grants that end in 2025 have been spent, and 29.1% of the $26 million in grants with end dates in 2026 have been spent. The next closeout date is March 31st of this year, and we will have until May 15th to close out those grants and ask for reimbursements. You have a copy of the grant report. Does anyone have any questions on the grants report? Or
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you, Sean.
That's okay.
Chair recognizes Ms. Basine.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. I think I appreciate this particular report, and I bet what is weighing heavily on everyone's minds is what's going to happen next, given the executive orders around the federal grants, and how the federal grants will be, how that will impact our school division, what we might be doing to prepare, which I know you're not going to have the answer for that right now. But I just wanted to hear, from your perspective and the administration's perspective, what is being discussed.
I'm happy to address that. So at this time, I think there was a 3-day pause that the administration has communicated. And I also think that perhaps because there has been a lot of confusion around it, that it doesn't feel like the administration is confident that they're moving forward in the manner that we thought they were originally going to. Certainly, we are extremely concerned about Title I funding, and as well as impact aid that could have a negative impact on our school division if we do not realize all of those funds, because certainly we plan for those funds, we need those funds, and it would be quite devastating to lose any significant portion of those funds. And so, like everyone else, we're waiting to see what happens. We don't know. We won't know until we are given guidance and information. But at this time, there was a pause, and then, there was lots of information about confusion and perhaps that being pulled back, but we don't have anything definitive at this point.
All right, thank you.
Any questions?
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, I thought you were asking if there were any other questions related to this report.
Oh.
I do have some general questions. And again, I wondered if you had any updates regarding the estimate from the city's funding formula.
I do.
Okay, great.
Yes. The city is estimating that the local contribution for the upcoming budget would be $167.7 million.
Thank you. And I also wanted to, on the financial report, so the reversion fund total for for school year '24, if you could just confirm for me is 11.2 million, essentially?
Our conservative estimate is 10 million,
Okay.
given where we are with the budget right now. I mean, with the audit right now.
Okay. And have we asked for that to be reappropriated to us? Or, I mean, based on what I think I'm looking at on page 6, if you could just clarify if I'm understanding, so that I know that what I'm looking at, I'm understanding correctly. So where it says FY 2024 encumbrance carry forward, on page 6 again.
My pages aren't numbered.
It's the very bottom. Yeah, it's the very bottom.
Okay. Something different. So this is the last line of the detailed report.
Okay, right.
These are the fiscal '24 encumbrances. So that was contracts we had in place, POs we had in place at the end of June. And that the budget for those, because those are already committed funds, carries over to fiscal year '25. So that's what this bottom line
Oh, okay, so
represents.
those aren't the reversion funds?
Exactly. It's-
Okay, that's why I just wanted to clarify, because I was like, were we reappropriated those funds already? And, okay, so, all right. So we have not yet requested reappropriation of those funds? Okay.
No.
All right. And any idea, do you know when we might be doing that, or will that?
I'm happy to
leave that with the
address that.
superintendent.
So next week, I will be presenting my budget proposal in collaboration with Ms. Spivey.
Okay.
And the board members should have received that report already. It was uploaded last Friday, I believe we uploaded it. And so you'll see within that report my plan, the administration's plan for what we believe in terms of the funding that we'll have available for us next year, which
Okay.
will include reversion.
All right, thank you.
Any further questions? Any further questions?
No.
Have a question?
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the monthly financial report subject to audit.
Have a second?
Second.
The board moves that we approve the monthly financial report, subject to audit. Ms. Tanner, will you please take the roll?
Basine?
Aye.
Buffalo?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye.
Olson?
Aye.
Thomas?
Aye.
Calagero?
Aye. All right, moving on to 6.02, the personnel report. We need a motion to approve the personnel report.
I move we approve the personnel report.
Second.
The board motions that we approve the personnel report. Ms. Tanner, will you please take the roll call?
Yes. Basine?
Aye.
Buffalo?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye.
Olson?
Aye.
Thomas?
Abstain.
Calagero?
Aye. All right, moving on to 6.03. The school board announcement of the candidates. I pulled the wrong pad out of my bag. Give me just a second. The school board has decided to interview the following candidates. Catherine Powell, Curtis or Curtis Forrest, Corbin Brown, Siobhan Smith, and Jason Ing.
Can you say again what we're interviewing them for?
Oh, I apologize. We are interviewing these 5 candidates for the Ward 3 seat to to be filled for the following year with a special election in November of 2025. Their resumes and applications will be made available tonight online. And do I need to repeat that, to repeat the candidates?
Yes, please, Madam Chair.
All right, the 5 candidates are Catherine Powell, Curtis Forrest, Corbin Brown, Siobhan Smith, and Jason Ing.
And Madam Chair, we can let them know it'll be on the school board work session agenda item on board docs and social media, immediate release.
Okay. So moving on to item 7.01. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I second.
Go ahead. Okay, no, go ahead.
Tanya seconds. Put her down as second.
The board moves that we motion to adjourn. Can we do that by ayes, or do we need to take a roll call?
All in favor, aye.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?